Get some new material, and what that material will be is we're going to continuing with looking at practice materials. So we've looked at forms and jury instructions and verdicts, and today we're going to look at some more specialized practice guides, and I'll define that a little better in a moment, and then we'll have a workshop afterwards, so you can take a look and use a couple of the sources that we talk about. And I'm being intentionally vague on terminology. Purposefully, I'll explain why. So these specialized practice guides, we've actually seen them before as we've done our searches for secondary sources. In fact, some of you found them in some of the exercises and used them as treatises. If you really need to put them in a label, they would be a type of treatise. I wouldn't worry about it so much. Good, again, to know the names, because as we'll see on some of the resources, that's the name they go by. And that's what they get classified under. But as I said, we've come full circle because we're coming back to secondary sources, but we're coming back to secondary sources looking at these particular secondary sources that essentially incorporate just about everything that we've looked at. Explanation, terminology for this, what we've talked about, regular secondary sources, as well as primary, giving us reference to cases, statutes, admin materials, sometimes even those difficult to find decisions, as well as some of the practice aids that we've looked at, forms, maybe even jury instructions if those are relevant for the area. The difficult part of this really is the name. As I mentioned, I was being rather vague. Because they don't really fit in, they're not law reviews, they're not ALRs, they are a type of treatise. So rather than talk about them, let's take a look. And we're going to look at a couple of specific titles, actually. Starting on Westlaw. And the first title there are two titles really that, again, I wouldn't know what to call them other than a practice aid that's a type of a treatise. Anybody hear of American jurisprudence proof of facts? Causes of action is another one. Not American jurisprudence, just causes of action. Okay, well, again, on Westlaw. And by the way, for these particular titles, and you'll see why I'm highlighting two titles and specific titles in a moment, for these particular titles, they are only on Westlaw because guess who they're published by. So you can find them, as always, just by typing in the title, and again, remember this view more, and you would see proof of facts. But more likely, you may not remember specific titles. The way you're going to find treatises, secondary materials, practice guides that we're talking about generally is doing your search. So I will plug in one of our favorite searches. And of course, again, you need to know that it's under the general heading of secondary sources. And scrolling down, we've seen, here's our favorite law review. And you may have noticed this before. Here's an ALR we've talked about. We've actually seen this very title before in other secondary source searches that we've done. In fact, obviously, we've done this search a whole bunch of times. I haven't highlighted it before because I was waiting till today. So let's take a look and see what American jurisprudence proof of facts is all about. So if you take a look, how long is that link going to take? All right, well, let's take a look at the table of contents since that scope link isn't linking. Essentially, what proof of facts does is what it sounds like. It gives you the elements if you want to prove a particular set of facts. I know that's redundant. I don't know how else to explain it. So let's take a look at the table of contents. So basically, if we go to the introduction, so our particular liability of health maintenance organization sounds very relevant. So what it's doing for us is proof that an HMO is negligent in the administration or provision of healthcare services. Sounds pretty relevant, right? So we know it's on topic, but looking at, again, always great to look at the table of contents. We see it talks about preemption, so it's going to clue us in and talk about preemption of negligence claims. Remember, we had taught in some of our other investigation, especially in secondary sources, but also in some of the cases, we talked about whether or not we wanted to think about negligence as a possibility. It even talks a little bit about eligibility versus treatment of claims, and just looking at a particular section here, basically it's just, it, as you can see, incorporates the supplement, so we know that it's updated, updated, and updated, and it basically refers us to cases that basically discuss this mixed eligibility and treatment decision. So again, it's talking about decisions of the HMO, so it's pretty much diving us straight in to our topic and what we're interested in. Scrolling back up to the table of contents. And then what it does is it gives us of theories of HMO liability. So, I mean, we had run across the possibility of negligence. We had talked a little bit, we'd seen the mention of fiduciary, and here it all is all boom, right in one place, and it even mentions emotional distress, one that I don't think I certainly haven't thought of. Maybe you all have thought about it if you've been thinking about this subject. So again, it's giving us much more practice-oriented approach than, say, a law review article. I kind of think of law review articles on the other end of the spectrum. That's going to be an expert, possibly a law professor, talking about how they think the law should be, which is great. As many of you mentioned in some of your assignments, law reviews are great because it refers you to some of the primary sources. It gives you a basis of what the area is all about, but it's not very practice-oriented or practical. So here, on the other end of the spectrum, we're getting theories of how we might hold that HMO liable, including one we hadn't run into. It's talking about damages. If we actually get to liability, we ultimately want to think about. We haven't talked at all about that yet, what damages we might, what some of the proof, elements of proof. And note here is where we get into those practice guides or aids a little bit. Here's a checklist. I think especially litigators, but transactional attorneys as well love checklists. So taking a look here gives us a checklist of how we are going to prove, again, this is proof of facts, liability of our HMO and so HMO hired inadequately trained professional staff. So different ways we could hold the HMO liable. Denial of treatment, vicarious, so all of the different theories, or at least some of the different theories that we have talked about. And then just scrolling down, here's model discovery. I mean, we're still in the research stage, but eventually if we decide that this is a claim we can bring, we're going to have to talk about the elements of discovery and bringing an action. So here's actually possible questions for discovery and interrogatories. So really granular, detailed practice approach. Now we've been talking about the litigation aspect, and our whole hypothetical is we want to sue, we want to bring an action against this HMO. But the nice thing about proof of facts, even though it's oriented toward litigation, is, as you can see, there's a lot of substance in terms of references to cases. Now, yes, here we're talking about a lot of the litigation practice aids, but back up in the table of contents, as you can see, let's get back up there. again, that if we hadn't already run across it, that notion of preemption and what it is, and obviously the reference to the appropriate statute section. There are going to be references, I'm sure, in these some of these footnotes reference cases, as you can see as I highlight this particular one. So there, even if your issue is not in the area of litigation, as a research tool, as a practice aid, this particular practice guide or aid could be very useful. And I've known a lot of students who've never seen this before and have come back after graduating, a few anyway, come back after graduating and say, I still love proof of facts, and I had never heard of it before, again, even if they're not litigators. Let's go back. Another similar title on Westlaw, and again, this is only, well, it's in print also, but at least online, it's only on Westlaw. And so we're here, I limited to secondary sources. And again, here is where understanding what these resources are will help if we limit to texts and treatises. So again, we get rid of some of those law review articles that we had looked at prior, and now we're more interested in the practice and practical oriented resources. So again, we see this Pennsylvania practice series. A state practice series tends to be, some of them tend to be very much court-oriented. Some of them not necessarily. We'll actually see some titles, and we've seen actually titles New York Practice, and they pretty much are just treatises on New York law that happen to be called New York Practice. So they can go either way. So here's the proof of facts we just looked at, and here's causes of action. Again, another practice guide, practice-oriented title. And again, we see the table of contents or article outline. Let's take a quick look. So this article discusses state law causes of action available against an HMO, another managed care organization. And you'll notice not long into the scope, it mentions ERISA and preemption. Kind of similar, in my opinion, to proof of facts. A little different focus in that it's talking about state law causes of action if we really are hoping to stay in state court, which we might be for a variety of reasons. But again, this gives us more the different elements of the cause of action. And we see some of the same theories, negligence. Again, defenses, so very practice, or what proof is there, what proof is necessary. And again, those checklists, practice checklists. Let's take a look and see. So what information do we want from the plaintiff? And a checklist, and information from the defendant. And discovery checklists and other aids. You'll see forms. So again, the pulling it all together, a little bit explanation, or more than a little bit explanation, pulling in some forms, some checklists, references again to that all-important primary, sources, and even some references to other secondary sources, again within the family of Westlaw resources, since we're obviously on Westlaw. I kind of think of these as a cross between ALR, because to me that article outline and how the information presented looks kind of like ALR. Again, don't worry about it if you don't agree or that doesn't make sense to you, but form books, and again, treatise. It is a type of treatise, a specialized type of treatise, a practice guide. And sort of in the general practice guide realm, as I mentioned, proof of facts and causes of action are only available on Westlaw if you're in a Lexis organization, You won't have POA or COA, POF, not POA, proof of facts. But there are plenty of practice guides, again, treatises on Lexis. You can go through if you have particular titles in mind, but again, I think the most likely way, at least until you become familiar with particular titles, is you'll run across them doing a search. Again, so we'll do our favorite search. Once again, going to secondary materials. And Lexis actually just gives us a separate, it separates practice guides from treatises. I personally think a practice guide is a type of treatise. I'm not going to worry about the definition. Basically, these are resources that are going to go in depth and give you practical assistance with whatever your topic is. The functionality is far more important than the terminology. So as I mentioned, New York Practice Guide. And each of these practice guides, because they're by lots of different publishers and different authors, they're going to have different features. So some may not have checklists or forms. Some may just be really a treatise, just explaining the law and giving you reference to primary sources. Others will be more practice-oriented with some of those practice features. And our friends at Bloomberg, again, in the catch-up mode. And of course here, remember on Bloomberg, we have to do our full terms and connectors search. So and we will search all legal content. Is it searching? Yes, it's searching. And again, this is kind of a review of where we've been as well. Go down to secondary materials. And Bloomberg has other specialized materials that we've touched on briefly and we'll be going back to in the next few classes. Excuse me, but you see, we have practice guides and finding aids. And not quite so many. Again, Bloomberg has a far more limited scope in terms of what it has available. And Bloomberg's an example where I would definitely also look in books and treatises. Because again, these don't get stuck in the terminology and think if I want a practice guide, I should only look in practice guides. It's a type of book, a type of treatise. Look in books and treatises because you don't know. You might find, see, actually to me, these titles look more promising than the ones we saw just a moment ago. Okay, so that's practice guides generally with a couple of special titles, proof of facts and cause of action thrown in. Any questions? I'm now going to move on to a more specialized type of practice guides that we librarians for years and years, and actually lots of practitioners for years and years, called Looseleafs. Now, the problem with the term Looseleafs, I think, is it's kind of like print loose leaves, and the term Looseleafs, I think it is analogous to fax. It's on its way out in terms of technology. We still all probably fax once in a while, grumbling, thinking, whomever we're faxing, why can't they just let me scan it to PDF and email it? Because that's so much easier and makes so much more sense, right? You have to go to the fax machine and the thing gets damned and then it doesn't come out on the other end. And anyway, I also think of the term Looseleafs a little bit like, I at least still say, I don't know if you all still do every now and again, I'll dial the phone. How many of you have seen a dial phone? But we still say it. So Looseleafs, unlike a dial phone, but like a fax, still exist. We still have cause to use them now and again, but probably with grumbling under our breath because we really wish we could go online. But kind kind of like a fax. There are things that online loose leafs don't do quite as well as print. Like a fax, you can sign something and it's really your signature. Although you could scan an email, so actually that's a bad example. But anyway, there still are some advantages. Just like I have been saying, in my opinion, there's some advantage to using treatises in print, using sometimes indexes or even encyclopedias in print. I think the same is true as loose leaves, but I sort of suspect in 5 years you won't see too many in print. Okay, so that's a little bit about the terminology loose leaf. I suppose the only substitute I've come up with is comprehensive, frequently updated, specialized practice aid, which I know is not going to catch on. So if I say loose leaf, no, I understand that that's going out. Specialized practice guide, maybe that will be a little bit better. Okay, so that's the terminology. Why do you care? You care because, again, loose leaves are going to provide for you, really they're one-stop shopping. The way we kind of saw proof of facts, pull together primary source references, pull together a little explanation, pull together some practice guides. Loose leaves do that and then some, because they'll actually pull together for you or give you direct links if you're online, links to the actual cases, links to the statutes, links to the regulations, links to the admin decisions that are so difficult to find. Apps either show you the forms, checklist, well, we saw that online with proof of facts, but do that as well. So all of those practice materials, practice aids, as well as the primary material, even legislative history that's so difficult to find and confusing, it'll be there. So rather than have me talk about it anymore, let's take a look at a couple of loose leafs online. Rats, it logged me out. It doesn't let you stay in for very long. Okay, so here on, do you all remember how to get here online? It's basically the topic list. Click on, let me just go back and do it properly. So here on the library homepage, topic list. And then depending on what you want to look at, if I want to look at RIA as our first example, I'm going to go to tax because I know that's a tax loose leaf. And then RIA checkpoint. And I find that because I know of RIA checkpoint. So RIA checkpoint used to be a print loose leaf, print tax loose leaf. It wasn't called RIA checkpoint at the time. It was actually called the Federal Tax Coordinator. So what you can see here, we've got editorial materials, translated aka secondary materials. We see the word analysis, that should give you a clue, handbook, forms, tables and rates since we're talking about tax, treatises down here, again, the secondary materials. So here's secondary materials, here's primary source materials, pretty straightforward. If you look carefully, primary source materials includes committee reports. Remember legislative history, the best source, has all sorts, has the code, regulations, cases, the IRS, the administrative materials other than the regulations. In the IRS, there are legion, there are many dozens of them. A little bit of news, all in one place. So the one-stop shopping right here. If you wanted to, you could just search everything. You'd have to click them off. And by the by, on your assignment 5, those of you in the, let's see, make sure I get this right, beginning of the alphabet have a question on RIA. So that's how you get to RIA. Another loose leaf. CCH checkpoint. And again, to get to CCH checkpoint, click on topic list, and actually you don't even have to worry about the subject because CCH covers a whole bunch of different subjects. So it's not only under just one subject. So again, those of you at the end of the alphabet, I ask you to look at CCH IntelliConnect. Did I say checkpoint? Sorry about that. CCH IntelliConnect RIA checkpoint. So here's CCH IntelliConnect, and let's And since CCH covers a whole lot of topics, it's not just one topic like RIA, those of you at the end of the alphabet will want to go down here to food, drugs, and devices. And hopefully that makes some intuitive sense. And again, just to illustrate how a loose leaf is one-stop shopping. Again, loose leaf, specialized, frequently update, I won't say that again. Specialized practice guide, comprehensive practice guide. We see those explanations, again, AKA secondary sources analysis. Primary source material, obviously straightforward. Indexes and tables, not so clear. The practice aids like forms, not so clearly designated, but if they are available, they would be in there. Okay, so that's what I'm going to call them loose leaves, but they won't last very long. Loose leaves are. That's why you would want to use them, and it is from my experience practicing and from what I hear from practitioners that I speak to even still, especially as they gain expertise in an area, so don't need introductions, say from an encyclopedia or even a law review. These are the resources that they turn to when they need to research. They already have the basics. They don't need the basic terminology. They're familiar with tax law or food or trade, federal trade or banking or securities. And by the way, these loose leaves / specialized practice guides do tend to focus around those regulatory administrative areas because there's a reason for it. There's a lot of different types of material to pull together. And they do tend to be more complex areas of law. You think of tax, securities, they're pretty involved and complex. Okay, how do we find loose leaves? Again, same strategies for finding treatises. Again, these are just a specialized type of treatise. Research guides. Remember, any law school is going to have, the library site's probably going to have research guide. Remember, we have ours under research and research guides. And we don't have a special loose leaves, and good thing because it's loose leaves won't be around, or the term won't be around very much longer if I'm right. But again, if you remember, it is a type of treatise. In our subject arrangement, we will have loose leaves where they are appropriate in that particular subject. So, and many libraries have similar guides, might call it something slightly different. So some of these loose leaves would be in here. Obviously, your favorite reference librarian, whether if you're lucky enough to have a librarian where you work, or give us a call. As I've said many times as alum, you are always welcome to come back or even just give us a call if you need some help. And then, of course, Lexis, Westlaw, Bloomberg, in all of the ways that hopefully now feels rather repetitive even. If we go back here on Westlaw, and we narrow to texts and treatises, some of these will be loose leaves, and we'll take a look at using loose leaves online in just a little bit. We saw CCH has a whole bunch of different topics. All of those, CCH was just a loose leaf publisher back in the print day, and now they have converted to online. I was chatting with Justin earlier, there are a lot of loose leaf print publishers who have seen what's happened in technology in the world and have migrated their materials online. And what frequently happens, Justin and I were chatting, sorry for the repeat, Justin. What happens, and as we will, well, you won't see, but I see because I used to use the print loose leaves, what they've done is they've migrated what's was in print to online. And that's relevant to you even though you've never seen the print and have no reason to care or compare, because to understand what the resource has to offer and how to use it and some of the pitfalls online is good to know that that's part of the reason, as opposed to being born digital where they might have designed it differently. And I think actually keeping in mind those pitfalls are one of the more important aspects of what we're going to talk about. As I mentioned, I think loose leafs, the term and the print form, are soon to be a thing of the past, but they are not yet. There are a few really, really good titles, useful titles in certain areas that are still only available in print. I mentioned this a while back, The Law of Lawyering, which is probably the leading treatise, and it is a loose leaf in the legal ethics world, only in print, not available anywhere online yet. I suspect that will change, as I've been saying. I did bring, by the way, examples of loose leaves, and I think you've probably already figured out why they have been called that, a loose leaf binder, and they were in loose leaf binders because back in the day, before things were updated so easily online, one of the beauties of the print loose leaf is that these pages could get removed and replaced fairly easily. So libraries would get the pages, they had staff, we have staff still, to draw the pages out, put them in. And so that's how they worked in print. If you find yourself, we'll come back to that in a moment, if you find yourself having to use a print loose leaf, these two particular loose leafs I have here are both New York treatises, New York Wills and New York Civil Practice. We actually talked about this one, Weinstein, Korn, and Miller. We were looking at the forms on that. Here's the actual print treatise. If you find yourself having to use a print loose leaf, just like you occasionally have to use that fax machine, what you want to know about, yes, there's a table of contents, yes, there's an index, just like any treatise, but some of the loose leafs are fairly involved publications because they contain a lot of different parts, and we'll actually see some of them online in a moment. But in the beginning, for some loose leafs, sadly not for all, so I'm holding up New York Wills. I'll pass this around in a second so you can see. This other one, New York Civil Practice, doesn't have the section I'm just about to tell you about, which is the how to use this product. And you think, what do you mean, how to use this product? It's a book, I turn the pages. Actually, it will explain to you what some of the different section designations are. It will explain to you if there's a separate volume you need to use to update, and update. In tax, in the old CCH tax loose leaf, there were citator volumes that in the old print days you had to check to update, and update, and you wouldn't know that unless you read how to use this service. So check and see if you do have to use print, look for that. If it's not in there, then you're going to have to just use your native figuring out skills. So that's how you would use a print loose leaf. Loose leafs online. As I mentioned, there are some drawbacks, and the drawbacks primarily are losing the context. We just did a search. We have liability HMO. We've limited to texts and treatises. And as we scroll down, here's corporate negligence, apparent implied, agency, respondent superior, HMO litigation. Maybe I would think to click on this. Notice the section symbol and the funky number. That kind of clues me in that this formerly was a loose leaf. So here's a section. I might scroll right straight past that because it doesn't really sound particularly relevant. But if I look at the table of contents, and of course as I'm scrolling up you're seeing ERISA and preemption, so this is starting to look. And here's a whole chapter on HMO litigation. I would not have understood this to be a useful section to check, and it was only one single section. And as we take a look, types of cases, denial of care, I would have I don't know when in our search we would have encountered, if at all, section 62:4. We're at 62 colon, where are we? 14. 62:4 could be result number 842 for all I know. And I would have missed out on a potentially very useful resource. Now, there are lots of other very useful resources we've already found, so it's not like there's a shortage. But that's in this particular search in this particular area. You may be sorry to have missed out on something just because it's taken out of context, whereas if you have the index in front of you, as many of you have noted in your assignments, you can go through the index and take a look at some of the terms that you didn't even think of and realize, oh, wait a minute, that is relevant. Maybe I wasn't really thinking of looking in tort treatises for this particular issue because we never really talked about this being a tort or this being in the area of torts, but it turns out that's how it's classified by a lot of these treatises. So that's one of the dangers of online. You can ameliorate that. You can avoid that problem by using the table of contents, as we've talked about probably now hundreds of times. Another aspect of online treatises that you lose out on depending on the area of law, which is why I brought down this New York Civil Practice CPLR. This is one treatise where I will sometimes just go to the books, go to the print rather than go online, because those of you, anybody taking New York Civil Practice or have taken New York Civil Practice? So the CPLR is organized how? What are the different parts of the CPLR? What are they called? Articles. So basically, the different parts of the CPLR are organized by articles. So Article 2 talks about the statute of limitations. Maybe you talked about Article 78 actions? Not yet? Oh, okay. Article 78. Article 78 actions if you're going to sue an agency, a state, maybe state government overall. I don't know much about, you'll know much more about Article 78 actions shortly. So if you know your article, if you're interested in Article 78 action, you probably don't really care about Article 3 or 4 or 5 of the CPLR. You're interested in Article 78. So for areas of law that are organized, basically that tend to be statutory, like tax, like the CPLR, and they're organized by section. The loose leafs are frequently organized by section. And again, a word search isn't going to let you know that. Even if you know that your area is organized by section, you're going to get whatever sections, both what's of interest and what's totally irrelevant, pulled up in your keyword search. Whereas if you know how it's organized, you know, I want to go to Article 2 if I'm interested in the statute of limitations, or I want to go to Article 78 if I'm suing an agency. So as I said, there's an example. I will, if I need to know more about a CPLR article, I will actually just probably pull up the book off the shelf since I know we still have it. But eventually, when the print goes away, what I will do is, because I am bibliographically aware, bringing that old term up again, I might go to Weinstein, Cornyn, Miller, but I will go to the table of contents and know, okay, I want to scroll down to Article 78. And the nice thing online is I can scroll down to Article 78, and then I can actually use, it would be on Lexis, because that's a Lexis treatise, and I would use the Lexis functionality to just search Article 78. So you can have the best of both worlds, again, if you understand the structure of the tool you're using. Okay, so while we're here on Westlaw, I do also want to highlight again, although we've kind of see this, again, the different aspects of the treatise. So here's another treatise on litigating torts, and we see checklists as well as explanations about health maintenance organizations, and somewhere in here, again, explanations about ERISA and preemption of state law claims. So again, the one-stop shopping that we've been talking about. So one way of finding loose leafs on Westlaw and Lexis is just to do a search and narrow using the filters. Again, as we've talked about many times, if you know the title, and again, as you become more expert in a particular area, there are titles you'll get to know. So you might become a copyright attorney and know that Patreon copyright is the place to go on Westlaw. Actually, Patreon copyright is not the famous copyright treatise. We'll look at the famous copyright treatise / loose leaf on Lexis called NIMR in just a moment. Okay. The other thing you want to make sure you do online, the thing about, I mentioned I defined, or my alternate name for Looseleafs was comprehensive, frequently updated resource. Treatises in print are typically frequently updated. As I said, we get the pages, throw out the old one, except when they stop. Publishers stop publishing because they don't make money, or the author no longer updates because the author has moved on to other more interesting projects, or name your reason. So in print and online, again, you always want to be aware and update. And again, in print online, it's more being aware of how up-to-date the resource is. Is it really up-to-date, or did they stop publishing it 5 years ago? It still could be useful if it's 5 years old, but then you know you're not getting the most up-to-date case reference information, and possibly if the law has changed. So any number of ways on Westlaw of getting there. So here, if we're looking at a particular treatise and we found it, doing a search, and we say, oh, this is good, go to the table of contents, scroll up to the title, and go to that I-link. Or you can just type in the title in the search box. And again, the I-link will tell us, okay, it was updated 2014. Pretty well updated. Okay, moving on to Lexis. Any questions? So moving on to Lexis, as we saw, I'm just going to get out of our filter here. More as a reminder on Lexis, it divides up, but I don't know if interesting works, useful resources are going to be considered practice guides. Maybe they're called treatises. So if I go to select multiple, I can tell Lexis, all right, here's what I want. It may be a treatise, it may be practice guide. I'm not sure about CLE. Practice insights might be interesting. Again, it sounds practice oriented. Let's leave it at this just for simplicity's sake for the moment. And again, it's not so important that you identify a loose leaf, is that you identify a useful resource that's going to give you some practice-oriented. And you'll get a sense of them as you start to look at these titles. Again, when you start to see some of the funky section numbers, that could be a sign, it's not guaranteed. But as I was scrolling through wanting to show you loose leaf, I thought, well, that one might be good, that one might be good, so I just took a look. And again, personal injury, action, defense, damages, I'm not sure I would click on that, but it turns out it's part of managed care organizations. So again, I'm going to want to look at the table of contents, same strategy we've talked about a whole bunch of times. With Lexis, when we go to the table of contents, we have to scroll all the way down till we get to it. And again, take a look, understanding the managed healthcare industry. If I wanted that background, remember we had talked about that, to get a sense of what some of our theories of liability of the HMO might be, we need to understand how they work. And so again, we see some of the other useful sections that we would not have had a sense just from doing our search and getting that section out of context. The other thing on Lexis, again, we want to update, and update. on Lexis, for whatever reason, when you go see a table of contents, check out the what's new. I personally, it took me a little while to find this, and I realized as I looked at different treatises / loose leafs on Lexis, this seemed to be a somewhat common feature. I can't promise you this is how they're always going to do it. But again, we see publication update May 2015, it's not even May 2015. So some publishers tend to post-date things. You'll sometimes see copyright dates, especially like when it's October and November, you'll see a copyright of something that's already been published for the next year. I don't know, I guess they want to seem more current than it even is, but you know it's pretty up to date that way. And again, searching is probably going to be the primary way you find treatises and loose leafs, formerly known as loose leafs, on Lexis. But if you do have a title, you can go to Browse Sources. And if you know, you've heard NMR is the place to go. And NMR's an interesting example, too, of the pitfalls of using any materials online is, again, that context. Turns out Lexis, for whatever reason, divides up what's typically in NMR, the set, that if you use the index and table of contents you would get reference to, but Lexis divides up NMR on copyright from the forms from NMR. So you actually have to either search both or go to them separately if you want the actual treatise part where the explanation and references to primary sources, and then yeah, I do want some forms. You'd have to go and look at that separately if you were browsing this way. Or even if you pulled it up as a search and NMR was part of your results, the NMR treatise sections would be separate from the NMR form sections, and you might not know that. So again, that bibliographic awareness concept that we talked about way back in the first class is coming back. Any questions? So briefly, loose leafs on Bloomberg are, again, back in the day when we talked about actual loose leafs, there were two types of loose leafs. And mostly we talk about treatise loose leafs that have the explanations and brings in the primary sources and all the things I've now been talking about a bunch of times. The other type of loose leaf was called the current awareness loose leaf. And we've actually seen this already when we talked about the BNA law reports. And these are these weekly, now daily, because it's online, updated newsletters to let attorneys know what are the new developments. So it's not so much the one-stop shopping that a regular treatise type loose leaf would be. It's more of a current awareness. But again, as we saw when we were looking at secondary sources, the current awareness sources can be really useful not only to let us know what's going on currently, but also as it refers back to the topic, it might give us some background as well. And we looked at these, and these are the same publications. Here's the Bloomberg platform. Here's what's called the native BNA platform, this pension and benefits reporter, available on both. And as you can see, here is today's. Actually, here's something about ERISA. I don't know if it's relevant or not, but here's what's currently going on. But you can search and you can find articles about some current event that will also give you some background. Okay. I want to quickly just show you some of the features on CCH and RIA, so you get a sense of what these loose leafs look like in the native publishers platform. And again, one of the main advantages, which I haven't talked too much about, so I should mention it now, one of the main advantage of these specialized databases is that typically they are flat rate. So an organization, firm, corporation, whatever, if they decide that this is a resource that they're going to use, and certainly a firm, an organization that's in the tax area is going to subscribe probably to RIA or to CCH. And the nice thing is, once they've subscribed, they've paid the yearly fee, and they're done. So you can search to your heart's content. So there's a lot of good reason to go to one of these specialized databases rather than Lexis or Westlaw if you are researching in the areas of the databases, obviously. So just to give you a sense of how these work, I'm going to take a look at the health care compliance and reimbursement. Not really likely to be relevant to what we're interested in, but it's the closest that CCH lists here. And again, you see the different types of materials, and again, the concept of the loose leaf bringing everything together. So here on CCH, to search particular items, you need to tell CCH this is what I want to search. I might want to search all of healthcare. I might want to narrow it down to a particular type, maybe just the Medicare Medicaid guide, if that's what I was interested in. And then you just run your search. And what we will see is CCH giving us the different parts of the old print loose leaf online. And again, they've just translated over. Maybe a lot of people don't like, I should say, a lot of librarians don't like the CCH platform. I personally just find it's not intuitive to me. Maybe you all, since you didn't use the books, maybe it makes perfect sense to you, which would be great. But so what it's doing is that in the old print they had explanations. So these were the what it sounds like, explanation. These were the analysis part of the secondary source aspect of the loose leaf. And then here are the laws. So the primary sources, enacted law. And CCH separates out from laws, regulations, and cases. So the different types, so CCH separates out the different types of primary. And then some more secondary and some tools, again, depending on the area of law. And C, as you can see, is a good example of how nice the loose leaf is in pulling together the types of material, those difficult to find agency materials. And look at that, legislative documents, legislative history. Makes it nice and easy for our particular search, which obviously was a pretty general search. But again, you have to know to scroll down, you have to know that it's structured this way. And likewise on RIA, did it log me out already? It logged me, wow, they have really short. All right, so we're going to go to RIA yet again, and we can go through the topic list. You can also use the search function. The search function I find is a bit picky, so if you don't have the exact right words in the exact right order, you don't always get it, so that's why I just go this way. So again, we've seen RIA looks like. You need to choose what you want to search. So if you're just interested in the secondary sources, check that off. If you also want primary, I'll skip the news and awareness for now, and we'll just throw in. And of course, this looks a whole lot different. So basically, this is far more publication oriented. So in a way, RIA has translated, I think, less than CCH in terms of moving to the online environment, because their publication used to be called the Federal Tax Coordinator. And so you see the word analysis, so you'll know you get the explanation in these 65 sources. And you see some of the other aspects, client letters. So let's just take a quick look. And so here are just those various different sections. And again, if you found a section, it's out of context. So what you might want to do is go to the table of contents, which is just called contents on RIA, and see what else may be of interest. And likewise, back here, sorry, I'm skipping around a little bit. In CCH, you see the document path. And each of these databases are going to have different names and different structures. So hopefully part of what you're picking up is just a way, I'm kind of showing you, but a way to investigate, which is just to take a look and click on the links. And actually we'll be doing quite a bit of that when we take a look at FastCase next time. So you get a sense of that process. Any questions? A little bit of time for a workshop. A couple of things I want to mention with regard to the administrative materials assignment. Actually, one thing, a couple of you have run across the fact that the Virginia Administrative Agency site that I recommended so highly has some broken links. And what I am coming to determine is that I'm not sure they update it. I'm not sure why I'm pulling it up. I'm not sure that it's updated, so I may actually rethink recommending, which is a shame because this is the best place I know of to bring agency materials together. So if you've already done the assignment or you want to still try to use this, that's fine. Just find something, find a link that works. The alternative, and why I really want to bring it up is not so much for the assignment but for your knowledge, is that since unfortunately this isn't as good as it used to be, since it doesn't appear to be updated, really what you need to do to find administrative decisions if this doesn't work is to go to the agency. By the time you're looking for agency materials, you know what agency you're interested in. So for your assignments, it might be the Federal Election Commission, it might be the Food Drug Administration. Look them up. And then again, follow your nose till you find something that seems like it might be decisions or opinions or materials. They're going to use a lot of different words. So for instance, health and human. So if we were doing this for our subject, our HMO liability, I might go to the Health and Human Services. Again, this is federal. You might want to do this for state also. And I would look for something, again, that sounds like opinions, decisions, documents, guidance. And I would look through these links. And if I didn't find it, which at least when I tried this earlier today, I didn't. Maybe you will have more success. I might try a search. I might try a search for decisions. Problem with the word decisions is it's used in different contexts. So a decision tool, checklist, and decision trees. I want to scroll down a little bit further to see if I find anything. I might try the word opinion or opinions. And here, sure enough, advisory opinions. And the other thing I might try is our Google site search, which is essentially doing something similar and searching the site for particular terms. But here, as it turns out, the word opinions was the key. And it actually brings us to a different site. And, this is the, we get there. Oh, it's still working. This is Office of the Inspector General within the Health and Human Services, which I wouldn't have known starting out, but thanks to a little investigative searching, I would have been able to figure it out if I needed it for our topic. So again, for the purposes of your assignment, do it whichever way is fine. For purposes of real life, perhaps that Virginia site isn't as good as advertised, unfortunately, but this would be the alternative. Okay. Oh, and I also, before we do workshop, I did want to mention on Thursday we will be starting the actual content part of class a little bit late because somebody will coming in to administer the course review first thing. I'm sure you've had that in your other classes or will so soon, so we'll be doing that on Thursday. Okay, so for the workshop, we'll just get done whatever you can today. As I said, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to work through on your own, as I like to do. So what I suggest you focus on, since we don't have a huge amount of time, is give questions 1 and 2 a try, and if you can get through those, question 3 is CCH and teleconnect. So those of you in the beginning of the alphabet will be doing that on assignment, so I suggest those of you in the beginning of the alphabet actually look at question 4, because you won't otherwise dive into RIA. Did I get that backwards?
Yeah, at the beginning of the alphabet we had RIA.
Okay,
The
so
second half of the alphabet that got CC.
you know, I have it written, yeah, so first half of the alphabet, take a look at CCH. Second half of the alphabet, look at RIA. And if you can do both, great, but as I said, we don't have a whole lot of time. So I just want to have you have as broad an exposure as possible. And let me know if you have questions.